Oh, there's my downloaded agenda. Oops. Betsy, yawning, I think. All right, closing that, or maybe it's Jean Marie. Let's see. There's Mr. Anderson. That's good. All right, those are all accomplished. There they are.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, John. I'm going to get started as soon as I see the on-air sign and we'll get cracking. Betsy and really anybody, just as a heads up, if you guys have your camera off, I can't see you at all. So I don't even see the little box that represents you. Just so you know, doesn't matter to me. I just want to. Good evening, everybody. This is the March 3rd, 2021 virtual hybrid regular town council meeting of the town of Scarborough, Maine. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Next item is roll call. Tody?
Counselor Hamel? Counselor Johnson?
Here.
Counselor Katarina?
Here.
Counselor Anderson?
Here.
Counselor Glystein?
Here.
Counselor Clucci?
Here.
And Chairman Johnson.
Here.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is general public comments. This is for anything that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda? Please raise your hand. Ms. Merrill, I will be pulling you into the meeting and your camera will be off.
Yeah, my name is Kelly Merrill. I am from Skowhegan, Maine. We do have a couple of Scarborough residents who plan on being here tonight and would like to speak on this matter, but I did want to let you know this is still in the front of people's minds. This is very, very important to folks, and there's been a lot of interest and a lot of outrage and shock that folks didn't know about this ICE facility being constructed and feeling really helpless about what to do. And we're trying to educate folks about where we're at, but there's a real need for meaningful engagement with the council and some creative problem solving to get this facility out of Scarborough. Folks have expressed a real dedication to this issue, and I anticipate that you're going to get a lot more communication from residents in your town and from outside of it as well, because of the necessary impact that this would have on the surrounding communities. I want to thank you for the work that you are doing on this and offer to be of any kind of assistance. We would very much like for the council to unanimously condemn this facility. The resolution that was passed, the anti-racism resolution that was passed in October is wonderful. And this is the opportunity that you have as the council to exercise those values. I'd be willing to talk to folks about that. We'd also like ordinances passed to prevent any ICE facilities, and we would like ordinances passed to prevent any cooperation whatsoever, not just with the police department, but any town officials. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you for your work on this and for keeping this on the front burner.
Thank you. Are there any others in the audience that would like to speak to general public comment? Ms. Rowan, I'm pulling you in now, and as you know, you're going to come in with your video on.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is Erin Rowan. I live at Bonnie Grove Drive in Scarborough. I would like to echo what Kelly just said. I couldn't agree more. I was excited to see the news today about the suit that the ACLU is filing along with some other organizations, including ILAP. I feel like as momentum builds, you guys have probably even more opportunities to see what you can do as a council to resist the ICE presence in Scarborough. As I was looking through emails, all of the emails that I've sent related to ICE, I came across one from a year ago. And that was the first time that I had requested a community forum around this issue. I know some of you weren't included on the email. I didn't include people who I knew wouldn't be supportive of something to resist ICE, but I did include those of you who I thought would be allies. And so I really appreciated finally having a forum a year later, and thank you to Councillor Anderson for making that happen. And I recently sent an email. I won't reiterate all my points here, but some of them were similar to what Kelly said. And some of them were requesting additional actions. Hopefully you guys are on board, and I would also request that any conversations that you have as a council around this issue happen in public rather than working on a compromise behind the scenes and passing something that's kind of like what happened with the racial and social justice resolution, which some of you wouldn't agree to pass without having a resolution praising public safety at the same time. So I think, I know a lot of you are committed to transparency, so I'd like to see that happen around this process. And again, thank you for those of you who've been working on it and helping. And I can't wait to see what else is going to happen next. Thanks.
Thanks, Erin. Erin, you might be stuck as I can't see you because your camera's off, so I can't demote you back to the audience.
Should I put my camera on for a second?
Yeah, so I can demote you back to the audience. I'm in a chicken
Okay,
and egg.
I'll put my camera on.
Yeah, and
then
just black it. There you go. Yep. I guess I can only. Yeah, I'll just make you the host, Aaron. We'll just. I'm going to remove you, Aaron, and see if it puts you in the. It doesn't give me an option to just put you back in the audience. So.
It's okay. I'll just.
Yeah, I apologize
catch you
for
on
whatever
YouTube.
happens. Yep.
I know how to find you on YouTube.
Okay, cool. Okay, are there any other general public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close out public comment. We are now on to item number 5, which is the minutes, approval of the minutes of the February 17th, 2021 special town council meeting and the February 17th, 2021 regular town council meeting. It's the same date for 2 different things, and that's simply because we created a special town council meeting to go into executive session. So if you're looking at why it looks like there's 2 different meetings on one date, that's why. With that, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katerina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Item number 6, adjustments to the agenda. I see none. Item number 7, treasurer's warrants. I signed them right before we went live. Item number 8 is the town manager's report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. A couple of things to report this evening. With regard to vaccination administration, For about a month, Scarborough Fire EMS have been one of 3 providers in Cumberland County providing vaccinations to really the first priority in the vaccination program, those being first responders. In the end, we've certainly done all first responders. We've included some federal officials that couldn't get vaccine otherwise, but were eligible. And corrections officers were added into that group kind of late in the game. But in all told, our personnel actually administered 1,140 vaccines. So we've been busy. It's been a mix of doing it here on site at the Public Safety Building, and in other cases going out to other locations, mostly fire departments. And we found it's just more efficient to do it that way. From a cost point of view, we've incurred just under $7,000 in costs, most of that being overtime. We did not want to rely with on-duty crews to do this in the event they're pulled off. We really want to make sure that when people had scheduled appointments, we had personnel to actually administer the vaccine. So at the beginning, we decided to do this by through overtime as opposed to through duty shifts. And then there were some incidental material costs. We'll be seeking reimbursement for over $20,000, and this is a flat fee that's been established. I will report that it's not been as easy as we had hoped. We are doing the so-called roster kind of batch billing, which we think will ultimately be helpful, but we are running into some resistance with the third-party insurers. I think this will get worked out. They'll be dealing with this with some 300 million people, I suspect, by the time they're done. So I have no doubt that we will ultimately receive those funds. We're very pleased to have stepped up and done this. Having said that, we're kind of hesitant to do any more. The only area that we might consider with the announcement of teachers now having the opportunity, I've made my counterparts in the school aware that our staff would be willing and available if there's somehow we could help that cause. So we'll see how that unfolds. Kind of incidentally, I've also heard that the Downs facility, this is the facility run by Maine Health, is now doing about 1,500 vaccinations a day. Their capacity is at 2,000, so they're kind of ramping up nicely. The National Guard is actually providing support, and actually Councillor Johnson reported that he had some experiences there, and things seem to be running very smoothly. So pleased to, again, have played a very small role, but pleased to have Scarborough at the forefront of this whole nationwide effort. With respect to growth management ordinance, as the council is aware, we will be we're working toward a workshop at your next meeting on March 17th. And this workshop is really focused to really advance the policy ideas that the ordinance committee discussed last week. Those kind of ideas were generated by Councilors Clucci and Chairman Johnson, and the ordinance committee was interested enough to want to know more. So we're focusing our attention on kind of advancing those kind of policy principles and interested to engage the full council and see where we go next. We're also working kind of in tandem on potentially a short-term fix, and it remains to be seen whether that comes forward. I suspect it will get some discussion at the workshop, but it may also be an action item up for consideration depending on the will of council. This would be limited and really focused on Section 7G. It would really be dealing with very unique and special circumstances, if you will, and that's why I term it as a short-term fix. But we'll see if that does materialize. And again, I expect there'll be some discussion at the workshop. Comp plan, I'm very pleased to advise that all edits have been complete. Staff has worked very diligently, as has Long Range Planning Committee. I believe Councilors Katarina and Hamel have both been involved to some extent, maybe in all of these long-range planning discussions, but they've met weekly at this point and really kind of moved very swiftly through the whole host of edits that the council requested. And right now the plan is kind of, we're integrating all those edits in the final document, and we'll be shipping it off to GP Cog, who's agreed to do final copy editing. And so we are on schedule to have it in your hands by the end of the month. And we can talk about, perhaps I can talk to Councilor Anderson and talk about how we move it on from there. There's been some discussion around a more lengthy and elaborate process for adoption than is required. So we'd like to just get that conversation started so we can start making those plans. The Piper Shores project, the so-called Meadows, this is 52 or 54 independent units. That project is underway, doing site work, including blasting. You might recall one of the first requirements was the construction of a berm to really protect those neighbors on Newcomb Ridge Road, and that berm construction is under construction. We've had some contact with the butters during the course of this week. I think some of the wet weather, melting conditions, and then frozen conditions have added some predictable challenges on the construction site. I believe staff has coordinated a site visit on Friday, which I presume some abutters may attend. And so, we want to stay on top of this as best we can. And lastly, budget is fully in front of me. All department budgets were due over the weekend, basically. So I'm pleased to report that I have those in my hands, and I'm working diligently to make some sense of it all, put it all together. We are on schedule for making presentation to the council on a special meeting on March 31. That would be a single item agenda for the express purpose of presenting the budget. No action contemplated that evening. And we'd look to schedule first reading for the following regular public meeting on April 7th. Staff is in the process of putting together kind of a communications plan, if you will. I know staff has communicated with Councilor Johnson and his communications committee to make sure we kind of dovetail those efforts. And very pleased to have someone on staff that can really drive these messages very clearly, very consistently. That's something we haven't had historically. So I'm hopeful we'll again reap some dividends by good attention and good consistent communication. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's my report this evening, available for questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay, seeing none,
Thank you.
I'm going to move to order number 21010, which is a public hearing only on the proposed amendments to chapter 405, the Town of Scarborough zoning ordinance, and chapter 405B, the Town of Scarborough site plan review ordinance. And I think the only thing I would add to this is, I believe Jay and Tom have received quite a bit of feedback from us and the planning board. Although it's a public hearing only, I think when we see it for a second reading, there's probably going to be amendments brought forth. So that's the only thing I would say. So-
There is, and Mr. Chairman, to that end, I would suggest that rather than March 17th, we have this come back to you on April 7th. That will allow ample time to prepare those comments. Planning board has some very good input. I think Jay Chase is probably here if you wish to hear any of that. There'll be certainly opportunity in the future, but I think you'll be very pleased with the sort of discussion and the sort of things we're looking for.
Okay, Tony, do we have to take any action and move that to April 7th or is, okay. Okay. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak at the public hearing? Allison, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I just had one quick point that I wanted to make in the site plan review ordinance in Article 3, Section A2I on page 4. The language that was added about minor deviations that do not alter the essential nature of the approval or affect approval of approval may be approved by the town planner or designee with the endorsement of the planning board chair. And this references major review. And so my question or my point on this is minor deviations that don't alter the essential nature, is that subjective? And would it, could it, should it trigger a butter notification? Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Any others? Okay, seeing none. With that, I'm going to move on to order number 21016, which is a 7 p.m. public hearing and action on a new request for a liquor license, a food handler's license, and a special amusement application for Nono Corp DBA Throttle Car Club, and that's located at 10 Dynamic Drive. Tony?
Thank you. We have all the applications on file. This is a new business that's going in down in the Downs property. We have received one comment on the special amusement application. And as part of the motion, I have asked that it be added that only amplified music be inside. All the other applications are on file if anybody wants to review them. The applicant may be in, I don't know if he wants to speak or not, but he
Okay.
may be part of the participant.
So Tony, do we have to add that as an amendment or or did we change?
No,
that
it's
on
part of the
application?
motion.
Okay.
Yeah, it is part of the motion.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
I only have the agenda in front of me. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions, I guess, before,
The one thing I would
actually,
add,
sorry.
I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
one thing I would add, the licenses would not be issued until he got his occupancy permit
Okay.
from the zoning office. Yeah.
Actually, before I take questions, I'll go to public comment. So are there any public comment? There's not, so let's put it on the floor, then we'll ask questions. How's that sound? Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
And Counselor Johnson, you had a question?
On his
We can't-
application, he did indicate,
Is this the one, we actually received an email from somebody that was concerned about the off-street parking? It
yeah,
is?
yeah. We did send out notices. I believe there were 5 abutters that were notified. And we received one back from this individual.
But, so how is our on-street parking dealt with? I mean, it's not part of the amusement application, right?
No, I believe the 3 issues he raised, one was no amplified music outdoor, which I believe is
Right.
dealt with by condition.
Right.
Secondarily was no on-street parking. And there's no, on-street parking is not allowed anyway. So
Oh,
I think
okay.
we have a mechanism to enforce.
Okay,
And the third was he didn't want people parking on his property, and that's not allowed
right,
either.
okay.
So we didn't think that those latter 2 necessarily needed to be actual conditions because we have a enforcement
Already on the
mechanism in
books.
place.
Okay, yep. So that should be addressed and,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
I finally got to it, and then you were done with your question. It was a lot of scrolling for nothing. Jean Marie, did you have a question?
No, my question had to do with the letter that came in, but that was addressed. So thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein, Counselor
Yes,
Anderson?
I thought I was muted and I'm not. Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Order number 21017 is the first reading and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendment 4 to contract zone 5 proposed by Mercedes-Benz on the property located at 137 US Route 1. This is owner initiated. Before I go anywhere, I'm going to go to the public. Actually, no, it's scheduled a public hearing. So excuse me, it's just a first reading. So does anybody, before we put it on the floor, does anybody have any questions for the applicant? You may recall we had we had a long workshop about some sort of large wall. I can't remember what it was. Blade sign, that's right. Are there any questions? I believe the applicant's with us. So does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay, so with that, I'll ask to put it on the floor.
So moved.
Second.
I'll take that as a second. And any discussion? Councilor Katarina?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious because I remember when it was put up with that blade sign, because to be honest with you, I'm sorry, Mr. Doucette, to say this, but I didn't like it. So I'm just wondering where did you go, it's been to planning board and whatever, and has that been addressed or what's going on?
Do you want me to bring in Mr. Doucette to answer that?
Yeah, please,
Okay.
or somebody from, I just saw Dan's name.
Or Jay.
so-
Anybody willing to answer? Mr. Richards, I'll bring you in. Oh, no, I won't. Yep. Mr. Doucette, you are all set. We can hear you now. I think.
Yeah, there have been significant changes, and Dave Richards is on this call he has that information with him. So can we bring him in?
Oh,
Yep.
sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Who was it that we're bringing? Dave Richards. Yeah.
Richards.
Yep. Dave, you are in if you want to unmute yourself.
Yep. The blade wall has been removed from the design. There has been some change since we last met, which I think are significant improvements. If I could share my screen, I could show those to you.
That's a good question. Dave, I'll just have to promote you, so give me 1 second. And David, can you put can I ask you to turn your camera on so I can see you? Then I'll give you sharing privileges. Or did you get sharing privileges when you came in? Do you see the green button or no?
Yeah, there it is down there. I've just got to get my mouse to cooperate.
Okay, all right, cool. So you're all set then.
Yep. I'm going to share, let's see, screen 2. Okay. The look and feel of the building's changed. I mean, let me briefly, we're here just to add for a small addition, which is in this area right here. So existing building.
We're not seeing it.
Hey, Dave, I can't see your screen, so.
Wait, I see. Yep, I didn't hit share. My mistake. How about now?
That looks a lot better. There you go. Yep.
Yeah. So existing building. And then we're working in this area here. What we'd like to do is we're adding an addition, which I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And we're also changing the glazing around the main showroom and in this area, obviously, of the addition. The walks will remain the same. I'm gonna go to some quick renderings here. So the look has we've chose to take off let me go here just for a second, if I may. No, wrong one. The existing building has these stone columns and has much less glass. The new design will be as such with significantly more glass. We're looking to paint the roof black. The blade wall, if you will, is now just a feature wall. And then just briefly, these are a couple of the views of kind of the direction that we're heading. So, and this has all been before the planning board, which got us headed, back to the council for our first reading.
Thanks for showing those. That looks a heck of a lot better than the blade wall. And I'm glad that corporate was willing to do that, because I know you guys deal with, your corporate thinks you should be doing certain things, but they don't always fit in with, what different towns look like. So I like this. I like this much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If you have any council has a question, you can just speak up because I can't see, so. No. Okay, David, can you stop sharing for us? I think we're good.
Again.
Yep.
Once I find the button. Where'd it go? There we go. It's up there.
Okay, any more questions for David or any discussion amongst ourselves? David, I can't see you to remove you from the meeting, so you're gonna have to leave yourself or turn your camera on. I gotta turn that option off. I can't. Okay, Tony, I think we're ready to call the vote. Actually, I think I can do it here, David. Yeah, I got it, David. All right, we're good.
Ready?
Yep.
Councilor Clucci?
Yes.
Councilor Glystein?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Councilor Katarina?
Yes.
Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes.
And Chairman Johnson.
Yes,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you. New business, order number 21017, first reading and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendment Nope, we just did that. Excuse me. Order number 21018, first reading and schedule a second reading to repeal chapter 608A, the Town of Scarborough Consumer Fireworks Ordinance. Jean Marie, I'll let you tee it up, then I'll take public comment, and then we'll put it on the
Sure.
floor. Yeah.
This has been a perennial issue with certain members of the community, quite a few members of the community, and I know it seems to come mostly from the beach areas. At least that's the perception, but I can tell you that it's also an issue up where I live. Some of the issues, well, let me back up. We've been nibbling around the edges for a number of years since it first came in 2012. Some of the reasons why I was happy to bring it forward is I've always thought it's a fire hazard, no matter where you are. It's disruptive to birds and animals, particularly on the beach. Excuse me, particularly on the beach, but not just on the beach. I get it that it's allegedly only 4 days of the year. But to be honest with you, I mean, people shoot them off when they feel like it. It is hard to track them down, but my belief is that if we just remove consumer fireworks as an allowable feature ordinance in town, it would help throttle back some of the usage. You're not going to stop it totally. I just know that that's human nature. But you know I told Paul I'm happy to be the fireworks crank. So there you go.
All right, before any of us speak, I will shoot it over to the public. So Robert, I'm going to bring you in. Can you just state your full name and your address before you make your comments, please? And you are ready to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Johnson. Robert Tricoli, 22 Forest Street in Higgins Beach. And I made similar comments to the Ordinance Committee, and Councilwoman Katarina summarized those pretty well. And in summary, I'm against fireworks, especially in Higgins Beach. And although I agree with the negative impact fireworks have on the piping plovers, my main concern is a potential fire hazard that fireworks cause. And our property backs up against the Piper Shores conservation area, where there's quite a bit of fuel on the ground and leaning in dead trees. And especially in a drought, it has caused fires in the past. Maybe not the fireworks, but there have been fires in that area behind our home. So thank you for allowing me to make those comments.
Thank you, sir. Gretchen, you're up next.
Hi there, Gretchen McKeska, 14 Houghton Street, Higgins Beach. I also was at the ordinance meeting. So as I described previously, I was one of the 40 volunteers this summer who was one of the beach monitors for the plovers and the terns. And my shift was on the 4th of July night. We called the police a few times. There's nothing they can do because people can get permits to release the fireworks. And we thought we almost lost the tern colony. I'm looking here on my screen. The state of Maine, as you know, has endangered species for both the plovers and the least terns. And one of the recommendations is avoid fireworks within 1 mile of the nesting area. There's only 2 tern colonies in the state. We have one of them. So if we're serious about our endangered species, these fireworks really cannot be on the beach. I was looking at the let's see, fire marshals, state of Maine. There are 48 communities that prohibit the sale and use of fireworks in the state. 20 of them on the coast, all of them, not all of them, but all the ones in the south except us. So we have, I can read them all: Kennebunk, Wales, Biddeford, Old Orchard Beach, Saco, Cape Elizabeth, South Portland, Portland, Bath, Booth Bay, Rockland, Southwest Harbor, Damascotta. So we are an outlier in not having prohibiting the sale and use of consumer fireworks in the state. So I think that, meeting a lot of people this summer on the beach, there's a lot of support to get serious about our endangered species. I also have a house here for 30 years that is wooden, and I certainly hear my neighbors in that concern as well. But I'm going to, at this point, be sticking up for our endangered species, and hopefully my house will benefit as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Jenny. You are up next. I apologize for calling everybody by their first name, but it was 3 difficult last names in a row, so that was strategic.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Great. I'm Jenny Packarduni, 6 White Sands Lane in Scarborough, Higgins Beach. I am at the East End, near the Plover and Tern nesting colony, where we are a pretty densely zoned settlement of 8 cottages. We're about 50 to 100 feet from the nesting colony. And, most of Higgins Beach is densely zoned. That end in particular is very dense, and it's all primarily wooden construction in very close proximity, the cottages to one another. So I'm on Higgins Beach almost every day of the year, and I'm really familiar with the varying levels of activity, especially at the East End, from May to September. Last year, I was also a volunteer with IFW. I put in over 200 hours near the nesting colony, so I really observed kind of what was going on, including evening activity, which is very popular at the East End of the beach. So according to the present ordinance, I and my neighbors on White Sands, if we wished, would be allowed to have a 2-hour fireworks display on property on both the 3rd and 4th of July, which is 50 feet away from the nesting colony. And it's the peak time it's when all of the chicks are at their most vulnerable. It's also in extremely close proximity to all the other cottages. And the present ordinance only bans fireworks on the beach, but not on the properties that border the beach. So the fireworks are alarmingly close to the dwellings when they're set off. I'm sure some of you have experienced this. So last July 4th, as Gretchen was saying, I was present as well that weekend. And fireworks were set off on Champion Street at Higgins, which is less than 700 feet away from the nesting plover and tern colony. And then there was an ongoing display both nights at the corner of Kent and Shipwreck. And we both observed the birds fly off into the darkness during the fireworks displays and abandon their nests and fly away from their chicks. We're not sure if they all returned. Some of them returned, but it definitely is a threat. And it's also a huge fire hazard. So I just wanted to make those comments and put in my input. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Lisa, you're up next.
Yes, hi, Lisa Jasmine, 23 Pearl Street. I've lived on Higgins Beach for about 35 years, and I have never witnessed anything that has changed the community more than the use of the consumer fireworks on the 4th of July and also around the 1st of the year. I have sent an email to all the council members that was brief and just showed a sample of a couple photos that I took of people setting off fireworks into the street, away from their own dwelling and towards the dwellings of others. Unfortunately, my dwelling was one of the dwellings that was targeted. And, that particular display went on for over an hour, and it put my dwelling at risk. It's made me very anxious in subsequent years. I have never seen anything change the dynamic of the beach and made me fear for my own residents as the use of the consumer fireworks. I strongly support not allowing the use of the consumer fireworks in Scarborough. And particularly on small properties or on large properties if it affects neighbors as well. I don't think this is just a beach issue. It is something that impacts anyone who's living on a smaller property where there's an adjacent property setting off the fireworks. And I'm also very sensitive to the fact that we need to protect the endangered species. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Allison, you're up.
Thanks very much. And I won't take a lot of time because you've all heard from me and you've all received multiple emails, I think, and videos of fireworks at Higgins Beach on the 4th of July and December 31st. But first, I really want to thank Councilor Katerina for bringing this forward and for the Ordinance Committee to moving the discussion up to Council far enough in advance of July 3rd and 4th to hopefully affect some change by this summer. I would want to reiterate a few things my neighbors have said and to clarify what I think is a misconception, and that is the endangered plovers and the least terns aside. The ongoing public safety concern is not about the use of the fireworks on the beach itself. I mean, that's a problem, but it's already not allowed, so it's an enforcement issue. And I have to say, in recent years, the Scarborough Police Department has done an outstanding job in monitoring, enforcing, or stopping fireworks on the beach itself. But the ongoing public safety concern is about the use of the fireworks on private property in the Higgins Beach neighborhood that the ordinance allows. Most, as everyone else has said, most of the lots are small, 50 by 100. So it's virtually impossible for fireworks to be discharged in one yard or driveway without debris landing on neighboring properties. And allowing this to continue is simply dangerous. So I thank you all very much for your time and consideration, and I hope we can affect some change. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And I believe, Terry, you'll be the last one. If there's anybody else, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll be moving on after Terry.
Okay, thanks. I'm Terry Kane of Gunstock Road in Scarborough and Ocean Avenue in Higgins Beach. I'd like to join others to thank the Ordinance Committee of the Town Council for taking this on. It has been it's always presented a lot of confusion for us as we try to balance whether we want to have it anywhere in the town or nowhere in the town, or, and I know you guys will be working on those. My comments here are really only related to Higgins Beach, as have others. And what Allison just said about there are rules that are in place that, you can't go on you can't do them on the beach. But there's a lot of stuff that's confusing. One of them is, so the current rules include, I think in their permit paperwork, a clause that says no fireworks debris will land on neighbor's property. And they kind of sign off that they're going to do that. It's not part of an ordinance, I don't think. Next, as we just said, fireworks are not allowed on the beach. Nobody's mentioned this yet, but we have a marsh area on the way into Higgins Beach, and there's very much not allowed to land anything there. And then there is, as a couple of people have shown, the consideration of the plover population. And by the nature of fireworks and even a light wind, it is virtually impossible to shoot fireworks at Higgins Beach without violating some of those rules. It just can't be done. What we have not been able to find to do is a way to make a rule ordinance that is simple, would be a simply worded thing to end the confusion. And I'd want to put this idea out there. As you go forward, you're going to be looking about Scarborough as a whole, and if you're listening to us, as you always do well, Higgins Beach as a unique piece. What should be written is basically to say that we want to see this component. No shooting of fireworks shall be allowed at any time anywhere east of Spurwink Road for its entire length from Black Point Road to maybe the Cape Elizabeth line. You could write that rule down in a very simple form. I don't think you'd find anybody on the eastern side of that getting upset about it. And it would solve for in the past where the first thing that happens when we say, let's make this rule for Higgins Beach, there gets to be a big discussion of where Higgins Beach starts and ends. So I just wanted to throw that idea out there as to something to consider in how you'd pull an ordinance together that solves for Higgins Beach's concerns, and know that you'd be able to have something that was simple to understand about where the ordinance, what the ordinance said. And again, thank you guys for always listening to us and taking us into consideration.
Thank you, sir. Glennis, you got your hand up, and then Eddie, and then I'm going to close it up if nobody else raises their hand. So I need everybody to raise your hand if you would like to speak.
Good evening. I don't have much left to say. Oh, I'm sorry, Glennis Chabot, 12 Houghton Street at Higgins Beach. Pretty much everyone has covered everything on my list. I did want to mention that the town of Scarborough does have a written agreement with the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to protect the piping plovers. And at Higgins Beach, we have a very active group of trained volunteers. We had 40 last summer who monitor the activity of the birds and educate beachgoers and dog walkers. And these volunteers come from Higgins Beach, from Piper Shores, from Scarborough, from Cape Elizabeth, from South Portland, and from as far away as Buxton and Cumberland. We also always have plovers on Higgins on July 3rd and 4th. And last year on these dates, there were 19 piping plovers, 19 counting the adults and the chicks, running around on the beach. And as others have mentioned, one blast of fireworks can cause these birds to abandon their nests and chicks. And as also was stated, the existing fireworks ordinance does not allow fireworks on the beach. And our reserve officer does a fabulous job at making sure that doesn't happen. But as Jenny mentioned, the properties that border the beach can shoot off fireworks. And some of those are really close to the nesting area. I am concerned about the endangered birds, but also I share the safety concerns that result from setting off fireworks on our small lots. There are over 320 homes out here in this small area, and some of them have two properties on a 50 by 100 foot lot. And debris does end up on neighboring properties, on buildings, on vehicles and driveways, on the beach and in the marsh. So I strongly support a change in the fireworks ordinance. And just as an FYI, in case some of you aren't aware, the piping plover is the official town of Scarborough bird. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Eddie, you get the last word. I think you're on mute, if you want to unmute yourself. I'm going to ask you to unmute. That might help.
Okay, got it.
You're good. Yep.
All right, sorry about that. Eddie Wooden, 34 Clearwater Drive, Scarborough. Thank you, Higgins Beach, for your support. I'm Grandin Pond, removed from Higgins Beach with a different perspective. And first, I want to thank all of you counselors. You're all volunteers, and thanks for your efforts and for signing up to make Scarborough as fine a place as it is. But on the ordinance committee, I see no redeeming value in the fireworks ordinance. I have been involved with piping plovers, lease terns for 20 years, protecting them, dogs, etc. I'm very interested in the three beaches, West End, Pine Point, Higgins Beach. I think we should bring in, and if we can have a full meeting, Inland Fisheries, Audubon, and really get their input and have studies in which the reports, meaning the blasts from fireworks, their negative effects. And I think it's a huge issue. Beyond that, I have concerns about nesting birds. I have a large property. We have 15 species of nesting birds, bluebirds, 4 species of woodpeckers across the way. And it's a disaster when these large aerials start exploding. And I grew up with fireworks. I've had M80s in my young days. Thankfully, didn't blow my hand off, but it's a quarter of a stick of dynamite. And I think we can study the effects on birds and mammals. My 2 dogs, Moxie and Millie, absolutely cower New Year's Eve and 4th of July. When 4th of July is on a weekday, I lose sleep. I have to work the next day. And some of the inconsiderate people are shooting fireworks late into the night. I would like to see our Scarborough reps report to us on any movement in Augusta to ban fireworks throughout the state and the sale of fireworks throughout the state. I had heard that that might be a possibility, but I would like to see their input and support for this. And I commend you, and I hope it can move forward to greater discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay, with that, I'm going to close public comment. Before we put it on a table, just so everybody's clear on what we're doing, if there's a vote in the affirmative here, we're essentially voting to continue the conversation and repeal the fireworks ordinance, which would essentially ban fireworks throughout the entire town of Scarborough. And then the second order here is essentially saying, hey, if we ban fireworks, then we can remove the definitions of consumer fireworks in our ordinances, because by default, they would not be allowed. If we don't regulate them, then they're not allowed. And
Mr. Chair, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I have a correction, I think, on what
What-
you're saying, but I could be wrong.
You're probably wrong, but go ahead. No, I'm just kidding.
And that could be.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Please
So
do.
if Tony could rule on, because it says first reading and schedule a second reading. So a yes vote doesn't mean we ought now, does it mean we're banning right away, or we have to have a second reading?
Yeah, I
on
said
it?
we were going to continue the conversation. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
but we
misunderstood
are
you.
voting
Sorry.
to repeal it. So I just wanted to make clear what a vote in the affirmative was. That's all. But yes, absolutely. This is going to come back. If we pass it tonight, we'll be taking this up in 2 weeks
Yeah.
or, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So before anybody says anything else, let's put it on the floor and we can discuss it. So,
So moved.
Second.
okay, and discussion. Who would like to get started?
Well, I will.
Okay, go ahead. And then Councilor Cucci.
I want to thank everyone who showed up and emailed. I thought Mr. Wooden's statement at the end was compelling for those of us who don't live in Higgins Beach, because it is not just an issue for Higgins Beach. They see more of it, or it's more intense because of where they are and just the nature of the beach area. Remember that plovers, as Mr. Wooden said, aren't just at Higgins Beach. There are a number of other beaches along the way. I visit them on Western Beach every spring. And I also just have concerns, again, when you get out to my side of Scarborough, fire issue's been really bad the last couple of summers around the 4th of July. And I know I have neighbors who are concerned about their horses and dogs. So I'm just putting that forward. But I'd be interested in hearing what some of my fellow councilors have to say.
Thank you. Councilor Cucci, I think you are next, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight as well. It's educational for me. I'm a little bit on the fence with this one. I absolutely agree with everything that was said. It's, I think, to me, a clear fire hazard. I have a property on the beach and I've seen dune grass go up with sparklers, let alone fireworks. So I think there's a real issue there. I think there's also an issue where it's very difficult to police this type of activity. Again, in Old Orchard is banned every single night. There's fireworks going off. And maybe once in a while they'll be able to catch who does it, but it's something it's really hard to police. So what I'm trying to wonder if there's a balance for the folks that do like to follow the rules. Should we keep a window open so that they can do it legally? While at the same time, I still completely support getting rid of it anywhere near the beach, maybe anywhere other than the RF, because I think there is a fire hazard and you do need some training to be able to do it responsibly. So I want to hear from more people. I guess that's where I'm at today.
Any more? Councilor Johnson and then Councilor Gleisteen.
Sad day of the state of Maine when Governor LePage allowed this to happen. That and shopping on Sunday. Somewhere though, I agree. Higgins Beach is a unique neighborhood. We do have sensitive ecology and birds from Higgins Beach down to Pine Point through Old Orchard. So I would somehow, at least I'd like to have a discussion on a balance. Possibly maybe doing a 1 mile overlay or something from the shore inland, from wherever our town line starts to wherever our town line ends, and forbid them within that 1 mile. That would preserve the, I think, the more sensitive ecologies. I'd like to have a discussion on that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councilor Gleisteen.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments tonight. I think, the case for, Higgins Beach, for me is definitely around the piping plovers and the terns. And so I also think the suggestion about making sure we define Higgins Beach and provide signage so that people are aware would go a long way towards this. But I definitely appreciate Councilor Johnson and Councilor Clucci's comments, to try to find a balance on this, because there are a number of people, it's very limited. There are a number of people who do enjoy doing this. And I think, I'd love to see the ordinance committee, work on this a little bit more, because, and I am not disputing, things that are said here tonight, but I distinctly remember, and it could be a faulty member, that this was asked of the fire chief. And I think he's got, information about, the number of times, which I thought was 0, that they've ever been called out on a fire call related to fireworks. So I do agree that there is, there certainly is a risk, and, maybe the ordinance should say the fire chief could just make the call to ban it for, one of the 4 days if need be. But I think, to strike this balance, if we're able to do this, we'd want to hear from the fire chief, and then, from the police chief, maybe we have a number of calls that we could look at, around town to understand if people are putting in disturbance calls. So I support, banning the fireworks at Higgins Beach. I would like to find a compromise for the rest of town, because it was the comments of Councilor Clucci was really exactly on my mind, that I think people will just do it. I think, having a few days to do it, people kind of respect that, get their fun out of the way. And then, honestly, there's not a whole lot of fireworks around when it's, 15 degrees outside. It is more of a summer thing. So I do hope that we can find a compromise, and I would like the ordinance committee to work on a little bit more, but I think it was, good to bring it forward so you could hear from the other counselors and figure out where we're at.
Thank you, Councilor Hamel.
Thank you. Move the whole thing for.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Don. You're breaking up.
I can't hear him either, Betsy.
Same. But now, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better, Don.
That's better.
Can you start over?
So starting over again, I was in the ordinance committee discussions on this. I did not vote in favor of moving it forward as a complete ban. So I think there's room for more discussion. I liked what I thought was an elegant potential compromise solution that Councilor Johnson had offered, which it suggested a 1 mile ban, coming from the high tide marks on the beaches, inland. So I know that may not address all of the bird issues, but I think there's a compromise here, and I think that moving it forward in its current form is not going to be exactly the right answer. But I'm respectful of all the opinions and heard everything. I think people have made very valid comments, but that's where I'm coming on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any others? Councilor Anderson and then Councilor Caterina.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement in that it would be good to look for a compromise to see if there's other alternatives than just an all-out ban. I do like the notion of the 1 mile out that Councilor Johnson also raised. I think that makes sense, and I think it would be good to go back to ordinance again and debate that a little bit further and see if there's other alternatives beyond that one that would make more sense as well.
Thanks, sir. Councilor Caterina.
I know I've said that it's all or nothing with me, but you know me, I can be convinced of other things. First of all, I don't think it needs to go back to ordinance, to be honest with you. In the past, the reason we have that, what is it? I've got the ordinance here, the consumer fireworks notification of intent, that came about because of the police chief and the fire chief. And, you're right. I mean, there was minimal calls, at least on the fire side. It's just all it takes is one bad fire and then all heck breaks loose. So, they've already weighed in on this. I could absolutely look at, I don't know if you'd call an overlay zone or whatnot. But as much as I really would like to protect my side of Scarborough also, because we get forgotten a lot, I at least would be very happy to protect the birds and the environment and whatever along the ocean right now. So I could definitely go for an overlay. So that's where I'm at.
Councilor Gleisteen.
Yeah, I guess my concern about trying to do it or not have it go back to ordinance, and I'm not saying we should, but I guess I just want to have it fleshed out. Like so we do the 1 mile, what does that really do? Like, does that make it harder for the police department to enforce? What does the signage look like? I guess I'd want to think through the details a little more. We could certainly do that at the council level, but I think, we'd have to have some, some changes to the ordinance and maybe, work on that and then, take it up again, at another reading. But I think we need to make sure that we understand, whatever we change it to as a compromise. It sounds like folks are generally in favor of a compromise, that it makes sense, and how are we going to do it? And I think staff might have some opinions on that.
So before I go to Councilor Caterina, I just to give my 2 cents here is, I actually like Mr. Kane's solution the best. Betsy, I totally agree. I think defining a 1 mile radius is going to be hairier and harder to actually enforce. I loved the Spurwink Road West comment, and then down at Pine Point, you could say East Grand Ave and South, or I'm horrible with directions, so bear with me. But to me, that's much more defined, and then it makes the signage incredibly easy, and it's very clear to everybody. So I'd like to echo what everybody said, except I would go with Mr. Kane's solution more than Mr. Johnson's solution. It's the same spirit, but I think when it comes down to actually enforcement and signage, that's the best. So Councilor Caterina, then Councilor Johnson.
Why don't we do this? I'm happy to meet with Manager Hall and anyone else he wants to bring in, and we can look at roads, because you got to remember you got Prouts Neck also, and do it defined by, east of whatever, and then bring that back to the council for the second reading.
Yeah, I'd support that for what it's worth. Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I don't think this isn't necessary to go back to ordinance. But from what I'm hearing, this is going to get complex. I really think we should keep this simple. If it's simpler just to go from the shore to Route 1, Route 1 spans the whole town. Police officer, no matter what, he knows what side of Route 1 he's on.
No, it's even better.
We can go from shore to Route 1. clearly stated. I'd like to hear maybe some input from the town manager, his thoughts on enforcement if we did something like that.
Yeah, so let's pause and Tom, can you give us some feedback from everything you've heard? That's a good idea.
No, I think these last few suggestions are spot on. It's not just enforcement, it's education. And I think there's equal parts of both. And so the clearer we can describe, I think using roadways is the simplest thing to do. Signage, we could put 50 signs up and I think it will be still a challenge. So I think keeping it as simple as possible is certainly a benefit to education and ultimately enforcement. We also would do a communication campaign around the change, of course. Route 1 does take up, probably at least a third of the landmass of our community. But to the points raised, that's where the sensitive ecological concerns exist in that general area. And that's certainly a simple way to demarcate. It runs end to end. And so it would be kind of a global solution that would be pretty clear to understand.
I like it. I like that one. So I guess at this point we can vote in the affirmative we could say is essentially to continue the process between now and second reading. Jean Marie can work with Tom and maybe bring forth an amendment to this.
If I could.
Yep. Yes,
since you're-
please.
You're looking at amending an ordinance.
Yeah.
I believe in this case, you would have to schedule, you're
A
doing a
public
different
hearing.
action.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have to do a public hearing
Yeah.
and then.
Which is good. I mean, I think we want another public hearing anyways, because I would like to
Yeah.
hear, we heard from Higgins Beach. I'd like to hear,
Right.
if this hits the Scarborough leader, I'd like to hear somebody
Right.
come, if people come out in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Can I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask a procedural?
Yeah, please
question?
do. Yeah, I need help. Go ahead. Yeah.
I do too. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So Tony, what do we need to do right now in order to switch it from this to the other thing?
Well,
That's a technical.
if you want to withdraw your motion and then make
Yeah.
another motion to move approval of the first reading and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendments, but we don't know what those amendments
Yeah.
are. That's the only thing.
Might I suggest, Jean Marie, that you come forward with a new item at our next meeting?
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
You
that's
can
fine.
Defeat this.
I'll work
one.
with Tom. I'll work with
Yeah.
Tom on bringing something forward.
That would be the cleaner
It would be
way.
cleanest to defeat this action this evening
Yeah.
with the full expectation that a new ordinance and proposed amendment
Yeah.
would come forward at your next meeting.
Yeah, and anybody who votes against this and then doesn't let me bring something forward, you're gonna hear from me, man. No.
Wait, actually, before we do this, can we all, because I think this is important for everybody that's listening
Yeah.
to us and watching us, can we commit to try to get this done before July? Because if I was sitting in
Yes.
the audience.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
If
yeah.
I was sitting in the audience right now, I just heard local government punt the ball, right? So I just.
Right. No,
Okay.
no.
All right, so I just wanted to say that out loud, so if people are watching us and they'll know.
Well, Mr. Chair, can we
Yeah.
make the commitment to I'll bring a new business back at the next meeting?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And then that gives us 6 weeks. It'll be
Yep.
over and done with 6 weeks from that.
Yep.
date. So,
Okay.
okay. Council Calucci?
To avoid some confusion, we'd be better off tabling this so that we don't have
I don't think so. I think you need to posture it.
Yeah.
This is a repeal. And so it's hard to work from that point. I think it's
Right.
better to defeat this and to come back at it as an amendment to the existing ordinance, which allows it to some extent.
It's cleaner.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna call a vote. Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
no.
Counselor Glystein,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
No.
Counselor Katerina,
No.
Counselor Johnson,
No.
Counselor Hamel,
No.
Chairman Johnson.
No.
Motion fails.
And for this guy, I think we can do this in short order. So actually, okay, I'll just be quiet. Order number 21019 is a first reading and schedule a public hearing on the proposed amendment to chapter 608, the Town of Scarborough Fireworks Display Ordinance, section 2, definitions, and section 12, consumer fireworks. So I believe, Tony, is the smart thing to put this on the floor and table this
I would.
or defeat this?
Defeat it altogether.
Okay.
Defeat it, yeah.
So do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
And Tony, I'm just gonna call the vote for simplicity because this is a,
Counselor Clucci,
No.
Counselor Glystein,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
No.
Counselor Katerina,
No.
Counselor Johnson,
No.
Counselor Hamel,
he said no.
okay, And Chairman Johnson.
No. It's what he's best at.
Thank you.
Looks like a Roman emperor there.
Order number 21020. It's an act on the request to authorize the town manager to sign all necessary paperwork to enter into a tower and ground lease for space on the public safety communication tower with new Singular Wireless. So before I put this on the floor, Tom, do you want to tell us what it is?
Yes, many on council, I hope will recall with the new communications tower at the public safety building, we built it with in mind the potential for leasing out space to various private entities, in particular cellular providers. So the tower was built a little more stout and a little, no taller, but a little more stout than it would be otherwise for this purpose. We did hire a broker to assist us in identifying potential users. And what I have before you this evening is a first user. It's ostensibly AT&T Communications working through a provider that will actually build out the infrastructure for them. For what it's worth, on some frequent basis, I would say a couple times a month, if not weekly, over the last year, I've heard complaints from AT&T customers that Oak Hill in particular, which is really our center of commerce, is some of the worst coverage in town. And I cannot explain why that's so, but apparently service has used to be better. So I'm hoping AT&T customers will see improved service here. Most importantly for us, it's certainly in keeping with what we expected. The terms of this lease, the initial terms, a 5-year term, $2,500 a month with a $2,500 signing bonus. So that's right in keeping with what we expected, actually. There are up to 5 additional 5-year terms allowed, so a total of 30 years. And that's fairly typical for them to be able to capitalize and see the full value of their investment here. So I do recommend you consider this. Again, it was planned on. We've accommodated space within the building in a secure area for them to keep their gear, and that's all part of this consideration. So we see it as a good thing, and we'll continue marketing the extra spots we have.
Any questions for Tom? Councilor Gleisteen?
I'd really like to see what it's going to look like. Unfortunately, I feel that the tower, the way it is, even today, it's very unattractive. And that one of the most attractive parts of town, with the beautiful public safety building we have a beautiful town hall, we have a beautiful park, we have outstanding schools, and the tower is just very unattractive in my opinion. But I've seen them far worse once antennas and satellite dishes and whatever start hanging off of them. So do you have any kind of drawings or any information from AT&T/Singular what they are looking to put on the tower?
I believe it will be 6 different nodes that will kind of encircle the tower. You probably have seen these similar cellular arrays on other towers. It's I think to ensure that they'll have 360-degree service, so to speak. But I believe there'll be 6 different nodes, all within the same real estate, if you will, on the tower. And then we have multiple locations above and a few below this location as well.
But I'd feel a lot more comfortable seeing a picture before we do this. And what is the amount of lease money they're going to pay?
$2,500 a month, $30,000 per year. I beg your pardon, I don't have any renderings that I can show this evening. I didn't anticipate that question.
Sorry, I should have given you that question ahead of time. My apologies.
Any other questions for Tom? Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, Tom, let's say if this did not pass, what does that mean? I mean, this giving you the authority to do all the paperwork, and I'm assuming negotiations and
the negotiations,
oversight.
The
correct?
negotiations are complete. The terms are complete.
And they were in the packet. So
they're in the
I
packet.
did read those.
Yep.
But what, in a similar situation, if it's not the town manager doing all this, how would it proceed? I mean, would every little thing have to come to the council? I mean,
I lack the authority to enter this on
Just
my
without-
own. You need to give me the authorization.
Okay.
In this instance and in all others, I try to bring things to you that are complete so you can see
Yep.
the end result and so you can make a informed decision whether you think you should authorize me. But my intent would be to sign this as it's presented to you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand the renderings from Councilor Gleisteen. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Tom? Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor Katarina and then Counselor Gleisteen.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled that we have found someone to rent space on this tower. I know that was the original, one of the original intents with the tower. It is in a perfect location for cell coverage, and as a person who has AT&T, who loses coverage totally up around Town Hall unless I'm on some sort of a Wi-Fi, I'm thrilled. So thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Gleisteen?
Yeah, there are, homeowners who can see this tower from their, from their home. And, I stood in people's yards and they said, look at that. And so I'm in favor of doing this, and I'm happy, to see the revenue. But I'd really like to take a little more time for us to be able to see what's going to be done, because once it's done, it's done. And, we get into these situations where people look at the council and say, what the heck, what did you do? So, and sometimes when you push back a little bit, these companies say, yeah, we can do this, a little bit differently. We can, this can look a little better. So I think a lot of times we do things, for corporations and they work with us, and that's awesome. I just think tonight, I'd rather maybe table this and take a look at the drawings and, make sure we go forward with it. And it's going to be as aesthetically pleasing as possible, and understand it better from the standpoint of what else might be up there. So those are my comments.
Betsy, do you want to formally make a motion to the table? Just because you mentioned it, I want to make sure I'm not.
I would. Do you want me to do that now or wait until other people comment?
I can circle back to you if you want to make that motion formally.
Could I just offer one comment that may be helpful? And I appreciate the tabling motion. Just our communications tower ordinance specifically requires co-location. And there are no other locations because of other requirements in that ordinance that towers could be located in this area. So this really roots back to a very clear thought that there's a practical requirement that tower would exist there. Its general appearance is what it is. And I'm not sitting here saying that it's nice to look at, but it's a practical requirement of the business we're in. This is just trying to maximize the potential benefits to our community and also to our bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure something will go forward there. I just think, maybe a little bit more information from Singular about what it's going to look like and if there might be any alternatives in terms of renderings. But yeah, no, that's it is what it is, like you say, and it's there. So.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes, I think it's a fair point. Can you hear me? Can you hear my audio okay this time?
Yeah.
I think it is a fair point that has been raised here about the aesthetics. Now that said, I know I'm here with Tom said about requirements and what the ordinances say already about towers that have already been erected. But you may recall we spent a long time talking to Verizon about whether or not they could erect a tower and then what it would look like not that long ago off the Black Point Road. So, and that, there was a long discussion. So I don't mean to suggest we should follow the same process here. However, it does seem that the questions about what it will look like do not seem unreasonable. So I'm a little bit, I'm torn on this one, but it does seem like a reasonable question. And, if people drive by and say, what the heck, I don't think that was what we signed up for, it would still be a good idea for us to get some sense of what it's going to look like, and why it would
why it would look that way. I'm not suggesting that we delay the process or not do this, but it does not seem to me to be an unreasonable request.
Anybody, any others? Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I have Verizon and I can't get a signal down when I'm picking up the kids from school. So I think you're kind of in a dead spot around here. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's because we're around the high part of town. So I think the tower was there. I think we had to do it for the fire department anyways. It was always intended to be used for this purpose. We're not going to go back and have it shielded like a tree now. But I think we're already past that point of no return. So and this is the first of what could be 5, I believe, is what the town manager said. So I'm comfortable starting with one here. And you know what, you're going to have an option. If we do 2, 3, 4, 5 other ones, then it's going to come back to us. If you can get a rendering, Tom, then I'm certainly not opposed to looking at that either to help inform the decision. I'm actually glad this came forward. I think 2 years ago, we were talking about trying to work some of these funds into the budget. And we just didn't have any takers at the time. Yeah. So I'm glad we're getting to this point.
I guess I would ask councilors to weigh the actual burden of the aesthetics of this versus the actual burden of no cell coverage in this town. I mean, if we want to talk about what's actually of pressing importance to our residents, I would suggest that getting better cell service versus, hey, those 5 nodes are ugly on top of ugly. I think the cell service wins the day on that, but perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps we were really had grand hopes for the aesthetics of that tower. I don't know. Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you, Paul. I think, at this point, it kind of is what it is. And, adding to it isn't going to make it better. But the issue that people, I think, really do have, or at least what I've heard a lot from residents, is the concern with coverage. And that's really going to make their lives easier day to day when you drive by, or if you live there. I totally understand how you look at it and might not, like what you see, but it's serving a purpose functionally that I think everybody really needs right now and is relying on. Some people, I know somebody who has AT&T coverage drops. They were trying to call 911 and weren't able to get through because the call kept dropping. And I think that's why this is important, that we move it, regardless of the aesthetics.
Councilor Caterina, then Councilor Gleisting.
Yeah, I agree with Paul also. I think that, cell towers are what they are. And I can't imagine that, they're going to do anything that's if you want to call it ugly, than what they already do. I mean, not that I don't particularly think they're ugly. I don't even pay any attention to them myself. And I look out, believe it or not, at my house, I look out my front window and I can see, particularly at night with the light on, the one that's on Scott O'Hill Road. So, it's just part of life right now. Cell towers are going away. They're going to go away probably in the next, I'm going to say 10 years. I'm concerned also listening to this that cell tower providers are going to be like, why do we want to do business with Scarborough? And we are going to be, they aren't going to want to put anything on this tower. So we got to keep that in mind also. But I'm going to be supporting this motion as it is tonight.
Councilor Gleising and then Councilor Johnson, excuse me.
Yeah, so I don't think, anybody's saying we shouldn't do this. I think, it's just a matter of making sure that we kind of understand what this is looking like. So if they're going to pull out because it's tabled and we take it up in 2 weeks with some more information, and maybe they're here to answer a few questions. AT&T is also deploying, 5G up and down Route 1. So at Oak Hill in particular. So that may help some of the communication issues as well. I just think, no one is saying we're not doing this, but, people, really understanding it better to make sure that it isn't all created equally. I don't know if you've seen cell tower, and it might be of height. maybe the height of the thing, it's not going to be any less or more attractive because they have all kinds of standards in the industry, but there are some that just have all kinds of things sticking out. And then there are some that don't. So I think taking the time to understand that, a couple of weeks, the next meeting, we do it again. We get some drawings, maybe Singular shows up. But that's my thought.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson.
Well, I think aesthetics come into play if there were options of the equipment. If there are no options of the equipment, then it is what it is. And I mean, I support it anyway, but to delay this to see the aesthetics, if we do not have options on the equipment, it doesn't hold value for me.
Yeah.
Because I initially thought very similar when we were dealing with small cell. There were options. The equipment did vary by carriers and different sizes and whatnot. So, but if this is standard equipment for the tower, then it is what it is.
What I can tell you is that they're occupying space about 2/3 of the way up, so it's not at the very top. We've reserved that for our own purpose. So this is not at the very top, and it is intended, it's going to encircle the tower with a series of nodes. I don't believe that there are technical options. I think they have technical requirements. What I can't answer is whether there's any concealment or stealth applications that can be shrouded in some concealment. Typically, those are on the entire tower, not on individual implements or components, but I can't answer definitively. That's not an option. I haven't asked the question. Sure.
Okay, before I call the vote, I guess I'm going to dramatic pause for Betsy. Betsy?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to table this.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, the motion fails. So now I will call the vote. Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
No.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 9 is non-action items. I don't think there are any. Item number 10, please raise your hand if you have a standing and special committee reports or liaison reports. Raise your hand if you have any reports. Counselor Anderson.
So from the school board, I know there was a workshop, Paul, that you and John participated in with the school board to talk about the school expansion, or sorry, the school consolidation, just to kind of kick things off. And so in talking with them today, they do have their board meeting tomorrow, and we'll be discussing next steps further on that. So more to come from the school board meeting tomorrow. They're also doing their superintendent search, which is open for applications right now, and the council can apply as a resident if you choose to apply, if you're interested in participating in that. So that's what's happening with the schools right now. From the library, they're continuing to explore the expansion at the Downs, and I think are working closely with the downtown committee to kind of continue those conversations and see how the grandstand or some other location at the Downs could be a potential option going forward, depending on where that goes. In terms of if they do decide that they really seriously want to explore that, that could lead to a potential budget request to support a study to look more further into that. So I think right now they were planning to actually put something in the budget, and depending if they decide to go this direction or not, it could expand the request that they might have coming forward. Other than that, there's a rec advisory committee. These meet quarterly, and the next one is March 10th from 6 to 7. So just an opportunity for people to join in and tune in and hear what's going on from community services.
Thanks, sir. Any others? Counselor Clucci?
Yeah, I had a couple. So we had a SEDCO Board of Directors meeting, and just informational update for the council that they do have an annual report that has a pretty good description of the activity and work around SEDCO that I invite you to review. They also put out a newsletter that has some pretty good videos from local businesses about the impact of the pandemic and how they're responding and adapting. And they also Karen Martin made a presentation to the downtown committee yesterday that was pretty informative as well about things to think about for the committee, for the market. And there's a lot of really neat slides that I'd be happy to share with anybody if they're interested as well. Finance committee, we did meet last week, and the bulk of the time was reviewing the Avesta Senior Housing proposal for the former public safety building. Committee members did request some additional information from the applicant that, and I think in coordination with the Housing Alliance as well, there's a next layer of detail that they provide that they are working on. So we're not done with that. We did recognize after the meeting that the portion of the site where they're looking to put this particular building actually is not part of the downtown district yet, or right now. So there would be an additional layer of process that would need to take place for us to be able to extend a CA for that property. We also talked a little bit about long-range planning and more specifically the purpose of it. And I think Tom captured it pretty well with his comments, but I think we agreed that we were trying to understand how we can fit in major capital improvement projects without having an impact on the tax rate. So we're going to hopefully articulate that in writing a little better with one of our next meetings. But I think we made some good progress in terms of honing in on the purpose of why we want to do long range planning and what the purpose is. And like I said, the downtown committee, there's some interesting work going on there. They have a subcommittee reviewing possible uses and reuses for the grandstand. There was some really neat work that was shared about other examples in other communities about how similar types of structures have been transformed. And it was eye-opening for me. There's some other committees that are trying to understand how downtowns have evolved in other cities or other towns. And they're planning mini road trips to really get a better understanding of one, what works, what didn't, and then what kind of things did the city or town do to help create the framework where that could happen. So there's some good work happening there. They are still working on their milestones. There was some pushback on the June deliverable date that we had provided, and I've mentioned this in the past. And I communicated to them that once they understand what their time frame is, they're welcome to come back and request an extension. I think it'll be well received. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Any others? None? Councilor Gleisteen.
So the Senior Advisory Committee is looking to do an outdoor activity in the spring. It's in the early phases of planning, but we're trying to give ourselves plenty of time. There was a pre-approved project for a pavilion in Memorial Park, and Todd is looking at moving that forward. COVID kind of got in the way last year, but we certainly wouldn't have that built by a spring fling event, but maybe a groundbreaking or something. So I'll keep people up to date on that, because that would be really interesting and a fun event, hopefully, and outdoors. The Charter Committee, I would like to, the Charter Committee is working very hard. They're doing a lot of great work. I'd like to encourage the public to participate in the meetings, but especially to consider, and there's not that many more of the subcommittee meetings right now, perhaps, but look on the town calendar. The subcommittee meetings are small, and you can find out what they're working on in terms of the different articles, but your voice is definitely really important. They got a late start, from, when we originally wrote the charge, and where you were saying maybe the downtown committee was thinking they couldn't wrap up by June. I think, a June timeframe for the Charter Committee could look realistic. So, they're kind of pushing fast to see if they could get done in April or May, but I'm thinking by the time they have to go through all the changes and then vote on everything, it may be close to the June timeframe, but that's probably pretty good for the council, because we'll be wrapping up the budget. They give us some time to review, debate, and get it on the November referendum. So not saying that's definitely the plan at this point, but they're doing a lot of work, and they're doing it. Some of the committees meet as much as four times a week. So they're doing a heck of a job. As Councilor Clucci mentioned, Avesta came to the Finance Committee, and I would, encourage folks, if you can find the time to watch, because there was a lot of good information that came out at that. One of the things that came out was that Avesta would need to purchase a corner of the property from the developer for $500,000. And so that was interesting. And there's some other things that are good to learn about that. They did complete our economic development TIF CEA form. Not everything applied to it, but they did go through it, which was great. So there's some more answers in that information that they provided as well. And I'm hoping that the council will take up the issue of the CEA pretty soon. They probably will also, well, they have, not formally, but informally, have requested a grant from the Housing Alliance Committee. So the Housing Alliance Committee would be making a recommendation to us on that. And, we can grant them a CEA and a grant, or neither, or both. So the two things can be separate as well. And it was funny because Councilor Anderson, not to put him on the spot, but he asked particularly, what other projects they have that don't have a CEA. And, they did mention a couple that they're working on currently that don't have CEA. So it's not always required for these projects to go forward for them to have a CEA.
Thank you. Any others? Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, staying with that topic, I agree that Finance Committee meeting on Avesta was interesting, and I encourage everybody to take the time to watch it. In the same note, I also suggest leaving that and going right to the planning board meeting of 2/22, because that's Avesta starts at, I believe, about an hour 50 into the meeting. And it's a good opportunity to be able to see the whole project and not just the Avesta component. Learned quite a bit. I was glad I did watch it, because and granted, the plan is changing over time, like plans do, but I think we'll be seeing these folks not too distant future. So as much information as we can get, the better.
Any more liaison reports? No? I just have a brief one. Last week, our leadership meeting was very brief. Dawn and I both had family obligations, so I didn't report out because frankly, we didn't talk about anything new. And on last Thursday night, Councilor Cucci and I attended the regional GP COG. It's called Chairs and Circles. It's made specifically for chairs, vice chairs, and people and chairs of finance committees. We attended that. It was a 2-hour workshop with probably 8 other towns, I would say, in the area. It's always informative to just sit around and talk to other towns and appreciate what they do and what they don't do. I think the overarching theme is, sometimes we feel like we're on an island here in Scarborough, and these are like, unique problems. They certainly are not. So it's always nice to hear it. Sometimes it turns into a slight therapy session, and sometimes you have some good ideas and feedback. So it was well worth it, and I'm glad we did it. Dawn and I and Tom have our leadership meeting tomorrow, so I will make sure to do a full chairs report. I was going to include what Councilor Anderson just alluded to with the library. Bill Donovan has sent me a couple things that I will send along just to reiterate and reinforce Councilor Anderson's comments. I know everybody's aware of this, but just to say it out loud to get us all thinking, it looks like the Beacon will probably come to us in early April with like the first workshop to present the project to us. And the Beacon's looking for 2 new buildings, I believe, 4 new buildings, excuse me, of the similar fashion. We did task them with trying to get very specific with their demographics of the people in their buildings. And we also encourage them to actually have somebody stake out in front of their driveway and count the cars going left, count the cars going right. So hopefully we can get some very specific ideas with the Beacon project. So look for that in early April. Enterprise, there's a project, as you guys have seen, there's a project being proposed on Enterprise Drive, which is the industrial park that kind of abuts the downs there. I know that those gentlemen, Don and Tom and I met with them a few weeks back, and they are anxious to get a timeline together. I guess we can look at them for probably late April. The Beacon came forward first, so the Beacon's going to be first, and then they will be on their heels. The projects are similar, but I think there's also some unique challenges and opportunities for both of them. Lastly, tomorrow I'll send everybody, the Downs has put together a pretty comprehensive timeline of what they have left in their pipeline for this year. According to them, they're looking at probably 72 more permits that they would need, if they were available. They were kind enough to list it project by project. So we have a timeline, we have the name of each project, how many units, what kind of units. Since this meeting is over and we're headed to the GMO conversation, I will drop that in everybody's email tomorrow or Friday. Give me till Friday because I want to do it after the leadership meeting. So I just wanted to say those out loud. Everybody I think around here has at least heard of those. I know 2 of these have some materials, and I'll send along materials for the Downs on Friday with my chair's report. So that's all I have. And I guess we're on to councilor comments. Does anybody have any final comments? You can raise your hand. Councilor Katarina.
Yeah, I will keep these as brief as possible. For members of the public who may or may not know, I was not happy to see ICE come to Scarborough last February. And I did do some work behind the scenes with Pingree's office and through the legislative delegation here, and we kept running into roadblocks and stonewalling and whatever. But so I just want to say I was happy to see that the ACLU has got a lawsuit going to try to uncover more information about what exactly ICE plans to do with this facility. And I look forward to potentially working with the council to see if there's any steps we can do. But I will remind the public that we basically did what we could do. And it's really at the federal level right now. So, but that being said, you know, people have the right to demonstrate, and as long as you do it lawfully and whatever, and I'll leave it at that. Very quickly also, I was fortunate enough to have a vaccination today, the first of the COVID vaxes. I am absolutely thrilled that the states finally seems to be getting the amount of vaccinations that we need, and that teachers will be part of the priorities now. I have several family members who are teachers, and I'm a former teacher myself. And so I thank Mr. Hall for mentioning that, you know, we may be able to help with that. And last but not least, hang in there, fireworks people. We will work something out. And as I mentioned, I will be working with Mr. Hall to come up with a new draft that we will bring to the next council meeting. And I want to thank all of my fellow councilors to having an open mind and thinking creatively about how we can address at least some of the issues that have been raised over the years. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I would just like to gently remind the counselors that we have a workshop on the GMO on the 17th. Please come prepared with constructive, forward-thinking thoughts. Thank you. At 5:30.
Any others? Councilor Hamel.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment, kind of piggyback on a reference that you made, Paul, from your GP COGS meeting that you and John Clucci attended, you know, and the fact that we were learning that other communities are, you know, that we're not alone, that other communities are dealing with the same issues we are. There was an article that was in the paper this week, which I will circulate to the council, but it, you know, addresses this issue of affordability of housing. And it does seem, you know, that we lately have been doing a great job of trying to address, you know, low-income housing and also senior housing. But, you know, down in Saco and in Biddeford, you know, they're experiencing a boom, you know, like we are in terms of expansion, dramatic expansion of different types of housing. And they've been very specific with some goals that they've been developing. including things like next home opportunities, a specific number of next home opportunities by 2026, creating 200 first-time home ownership opportunities for people that are in the 80 to 120% of median income, to create or preserve 90 units of affordable housing. So they have specific targets that they've developed, which are measurable. So as we go through our work on the GMO and our other work that touches on development, the comprehensive plan and so forth, I am going to be looking forward to working with the council to get very specific and trying to develop some goals for us as a council that are quantifiable and measurable, that will address sort of the workforce component, the affordability issue that is affecting everybody. So I'd just like to share that thought and look forward to talking more about that, not only at our workshop next week, but in these other forums that we have.
Thank you, sir. Any others? Any other public, general counselor comments? None. Real brief, I just wanted to address, Jean Marie, you brought up the issues surrounding the ICE facility. I wanted to assure the public, I know there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion amongst us, quote, privately about this ICE facility. I think this is a very difficult scenario that we're all wrestling with. So I just wanted, there isn't some sort of, Aaron Rowan had spoken, rightfully so, saying, hey, let's hash this out in public. There hasn't been much on our end as far as 7 of us getting together, talking about what to do here. John Anderson has said a few times, I have had a conversation with Councilor Anderson, and, one of the things, my biggest concern with it is frankly not so much about the facility, but what the message would send to the people that live in Scarborough, right? And I want people that are here to feel safe and welcome here. And whether you agree with ICE or you don't agree with ICE or what have you, forget about the national politics about it. I just want people that live in Scarborough to feel like they belong in Scarborough and they're safe in Scarborough. And, that's what I hope our energy is on. One of the things that we have brainstormed, I'm not holding the council to this whatsoever, but, after the fact, we could consider banning all detention centers in industrial areas. And yes, that doesn't get rid of the ICE in town, but it makes them a non-conforming use, and it sends a signal that we're okay with ICE and we're not okay with ICE expanding. And again, I'm just literally just speaking for myself here, but I did want to acknowledge that, that we're not silent because we're trying to stonewall. We're silent because it's a very difficult situation. And frankly, at the local level, it is very difficult to take on national politics at the local level. And frankly, it's always best to try to avoid them because we work better when we're working for Scarborough. And obviously these intersect, and I'm not claiming that they don't, but it's unique and we're trying. So those are my comments. Councilor Anderson, feel free to help me there.
Yeah. No, I would just ask that when you, the vice chair, and Tom meet tomorrow in your planning meeting, if you guys maybe consider and offer up a couple of recommendations on how we can continue this discussion. Because Paul, I think like you said, those are some great ideas that we should continue to explore as a body. And I just want to make sure we have a good public forum, whether it's a workshop or some other way to include it in future council meetings, just to make sure that we kind of figure out what is the step we want to take, if any. I mean, it's going to be up to us to figure that out together. And I want to make sure we have that opportunity as a body to discuss it.
Sure. Any others? None? Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Tody.
Clutch.
Yes.
Counselor Gleifstein,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good